Welcome to the AirCon Vault. Here, you can find the recordings of the live streams from AirWiggle's audio conference. These are made free thanks to our sponsors, as sound effects, Aftertouch Audio, Boom Library, Fmod, Game Audio Learning, Game SoundCon, Kilohertz, Red Rooms, Soundcuts, Strata from Audio Kinetic, and AirWiggle, the online home for audio people. We hope you enjoy the video.
Sonic branding and UX audio. Welcome work, folks. Exactly. All right, I'm gonna distract myself from the chat really quick. Otherwise, or I'm gonna undistract myself from the chat. What we're gonna do is we are going to leave time at the end of this for a bunch of Q&A and chats, because I know you guys probably have gone to a bunch of technical talks. This is not that. This is a little bit more aesthetic and a little bit more process related. We're just going to talk about maybe even the psychological differences between approaching sonic branding, UX audio, what it's like to work with UX designers, what the difference is between working in games with game designers, and then kind of on the product side of things. So that's what this talk is all about. I'm going to go through some brief history. Bear with me on that. You know, with history, we're doomed to repeat our own mistakes if we don't review where we came from. And then I'm going to go into some examples on the UI audio side from games, and then crossfade into UX audio, talk about the differences. And then the last third of this is going to be sonic branding, and talking about kind of creating sonic logos for firms, for products, for any kind of identity, any type of branding and marketing aspect of things. It's interesting. I know game folks tend to have an opportunity to do a little bit of sonic branding and UI audio, of course, just from being involved in games and being involved in things and being the go-to person for stuff like that. So we're just going to talk about the approaches of that, and I'm going to talk about my experience. Real quick background, and it'll be quick, I promise. I've been given feedback. Don't talk about yourself and your own background for so long, so I won't. My name is Chris Hegstrom. I've been in interactive sound design now for almost 30 years, about 28 years total. In the aughts, I was in game sound design, probably worked on some games that a lot of folks have maybe played growing up. Games like Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Star Wars Episode 3, James Bond From Russia With Love, God of War 3, Black, Burnout, Paradise, Connect Adventures, and throughout the maybe about 10 years of experience of doing game audio, when I worked at Microsoft, the team that was working on the Connect camera and the Connect game titles transitioned over to work on Hololens, which is the mixed reality headset device. When we all kind of went over there, we sort of inadvertently transitioned from games to user experience, because now all of a sudden we're working on products. So we're working on games for products, but my experience was working on the games, and then I actually went over to the UX team at Microsoft and kind of understood how vastly different the approaches were for this. So this talk is sonic branding and UX audio. We're going to be talking about the differences, the similarities, and let's kick into it with the history. Here we go. All right. So history of sonic notification. Going to be a little silly. Might be a little corny for a few slides, but that's all right. Bear with me. It all means stuff. In the earliest days of early days, societies were kind of built around churches, religion, whatever. It's more of a societal construct. Whereas if you are within the sound of the bell tolling, you are part of that society. In fact, those of you from England might know the story of the Bow Bell. And the Bow Bell in London back in the day, if you were born within the ringing of the Bow Bell, you were considered Cockney. Anything outside of that, if you were outside of the earshot of the Bow Bell, you were considered Mockney or not Cockney. And that was definitely a pride thing for the London folks. So in addition to call of worship, church bells were used to inform residents of a lot of things and make them feel kind of connected to the rest of the society. Weddings and funerals, victory celebrations, clock chimes, which can get a little bit much, and then warnings as well, which is kind of interesting when you think about alarms and notifications, and then church bells sort of originating from that. So let's go into doorbells for a second. So this is interesting for me because when I was at Amazon, I actually redesigned, I designed all of the doorbell sounds for Alexa and for the Echo device. So I did a pretty deep dive into doorbells. When we're talking about sonic notifications, you can't get any more on the nose than doorbells. In the 1800s, doorbells replaced door knockers and became widespread soon after. Integrated into the telephone systems in the 1850s, wireless doorbells using radio waves in the 1930s, which is pretty crazy technology for 1930s, right? And then we started getting into a little bit of sonic branding there with the multi-tone chimes and the melodies, something that we're doing a lot with piezo speakers, especially on appliances and Japanese water filters and stuff like that. It's something I have. In the 70s, there's introduction of videos, and then 2010s, the smart doorbell systems. Now, really quick anecdote. I was at Amazon when they acquired Ring. And I remember one day I was speaking to, I'm going to blank on his name. So it's the CEO of Ring, and he was on Shark Tank. I don't remember his name. Probably should have done some research for a presentation that I'm going to mention him. Anyway, he and I were speaking in the kitchen on the 30th floor of day one at Amazon. And we were talking about doorbells. I was telling him I'm doing doorbells, and he was telling me about the Ring doorbell, which my dogs have a Pavlovian reaction to every time they hear that. Even if it's on television or something like that, they just start barking and going crazy. He said the nickname for that, dun, 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 I'm not going to do it too loud in case the dogs hear it. The nickname for that was the $1 million sound. And I don't think any particular agency saw $1 million for creating that sound, but I do believe that over the course of iteration of these that particular doorbell sound, and then the amount of stakeholders and approvals that go through, and probably the amount of firms that kind of bid on making that doorbell sound, I believe it cost $1 million for that. So a little bit of an anecdote about doorbells and the kind of importance that they play in the history of sonic notification. I don't have anything interesting to present on elevator sonification, but I do find it really fascinating that in the 1870s, there was an elevator operator strike. So in a way, elevators are kind of the first service organization to be kind of taken over by automation. So you're asking people to kind of take a big, not, I don't want to say leap of faith because that doesn't sound good with an elevator, but you're asking people to put a lot of trust in you when you go into an elevator, especially the older ones that are all kind of pulley systems and things like that. So this is the first introduction of audio notifications to soothe and, I don't want to say manipulate, but coerce the user in a psychological way. So the buttons and chimes were introduced because if an elevator comes to a stop, oh my God, what happened? Ding. Oh, whew. Okay, we're on 4th floor. And what's really interesting too, and when I went into the deep dive exploration of elevator sounds, Muzak, which is also known as elevator music, was created specifically to put in the background of these elevators to calm people down. So the design of it was as like, unobtrusive as possible to really just kind of calm the nervous system of the people that were on there. So I thought that was pretty interesting. 1950, first operatorless elevator, and then 62 full automatic control. So yeah, that's elevators. So let's talk about alarms and sirens. Quick disclaimer, the last UX sound that I did on contract for a company was about a year ago. I did the sound of a siren for a drone that's used by police and military. It was over a year ago, so I don't know if I really would do that nowadays, given current political climates, but at the time, it was all good. I worked with the speaker designer to maximize the throw of the siren sound out of a small speaker box. So that was an interesting one. I didn't include it in this deck. What I did include in this deck is when I worked at Amazon, we had this feature on the Alexa and Echo devices that was called Amazon Guard. And with that, basically, there's sort of a home security system built into the Echo devices that allows you to make sure that everything's good in your house. And just watch the video, check it out.
That suggest a possible intruder, Alexa will sound a siren on your Echo device. Using your Echo devices and connected smart lights and cameras, Alexa can deter unwanted visitors by making it seem like someone's home. If your outdoor camera detects motion, Alexa can play the sound of dogs barking on your Echo.
Now, the most important thing about that video is that my dog Moya was the one that was recorded for that dog bark sound. She's a vicious German Shepherd. She's not vicious. She's just kind of feral. She's a German Shepherd, and we recorded her for that dog bark sound. Before that, the alarm sound that I had in there was created to capture the attention of the user. And what's interesting is the team on Amazon Audio UX basically designed this scale of urgency. And between things like, package notifications that, like, hey, your package just got delivered. That's probably about a 2 or 3 on the urgency list because, it's not something that we necessarily want to disrupt people for. Alarms, CO2, fire detection alarms, sirens, that's more of an 8 or 9 on the urgency. Now, what's really interesting on this is we kind of pull all this stuff together as far as urgency and the conditions in which you are playing back these UX notifications. And what we come up with is not that
suggest a possible intruder. Alexa will sound a siren on your Echo device. Using your Echo device.
So apologies for the formatting here and the very small font. This is what happens when you take a keynote to a PowerPoint to Google Slide. There's a term called ubiquitous computing. And essentially what that means is with this particular UX design, and especially within the audio UX design, ubiquitous computing is, or ubiquitous UX is essentially computing that happens within, integrated within the world, as opposed to creating a, fake world like you would have in video games or virtual reality. So there's a sense of subtlety and sort of almost what's the word I'm looking for? You have to be very intentional with your sounds and also very respectful with the environment that you may or may not be interrupting, and sort of how you go about interrupting that environment, which is why UX audio in many cases, and especially things for devices and for products, are a little bit less obtrusive. Hopefully, if they're designed well, they're less obtrusive. If they're designed poorly, they're very obtrusive. But one of the main approaches, and I think the biggest takeaway from designing in the UX product space, is to be respectful and mindful of the environment that you are going to be interrupting, because it's much, much different if somebody is playing God of War and then, Kratos is going to scream every time you hit a select button or something like that. That you're already immersed in that universe. You're already kind of understanding what's going on with that. When you get a notification that a product, package has arrived or something like that, you want it to be as sort of almost like right on the periphery of the subliminal. You want it to be recognizable to the person that hears it, but not something that like is invasive. That's enough of that. So to explain more about that and more about the difference, we'll talk about the 4 F's. So form and function is the big first 2 F's that you hear a lot of UX designers talk about, a lot of kind of big D design, Dieter Rams, Johnny Ives, sort of product and industrial design. They're always talking about form in the service of function. And with UX, you will definitely go more towards the function side of things because you want to be effective before you're delightful. You want to be delightfully effective, ideally, but if you need to prioritize one, it is the effectiveness. So the second 2 F's that I've kind of come up with is friction and flow. So the idea is, when I'm playing a video game, I'm entering into friction that has been determined. The whole idea of games, is to have friction, and then to overcome that friction. And that's the gamification of it. That's the delight of it. With UX, you're not necessarily looking for any sort of friction because you are in your house, you're at dinner, you are talking to your family, you're having quiet time. So you want more flow than friction. If you get a notification, you want that to very kind of respectfully and very, you want it to integrate into the universe and the environment that you have. So this next video is Hugo, who is in charge of the audio at Apple, and he did a talk back in 2017 about UX audio, and he gave this example about what Apple Maps would sound like if it was designed for a video game.
It is an important one. Silence is golden. It may sound funny from a sound designer, but the absence of sound is as important as adding sound. Really try to find the right balance. If we wouldn't do this, our Maps app could easily sound like something like this. Bit much, don't you think?
So super dramatic example. And he's not making fun of video games. He's not making fun of video games audio. What's interesting about that example is this is what you hear when you watch TV shows, and they have TV shows about people using maps or computers, and everything has, you know, a sonic notification. That's not real life. That's not what you want in real life. That's too much. Like Hugo said at the end of that. So this exactly is the kind of basis and the foundation of the difference between UX audio and game user interface audio. Hey, thanks, Hugo. Well, we heard you before. Okay. So on the opposite side of that is the arcade games, and video games are, you know, derivative, come from arcade games, which came from pinball machines. Now, in arcades, it is, as some of you may remember, if not, there's ASMR videos. This is what I got. It's ASMR videos of arcade games, which I think is really strange. Anyway, that is a sensory overload, right? Anyone that has kind of sensory perception issues and stuff like that, or it's going to be, you know, and it's as designed, right? You go into an arcade and it's all about, you know, the lights and the sounds and everything like that. So one of the reasons that arcade sounds and video game sounds concurrently have sort of evolved to be a little bit sharper, a little bit more in your face, is because those arcade attract loops were the early example of sonic branding in video games. And how do you, as a game designer, stand out when you have, you know, a Tempest console here, and then a Defender console here, and then a Miss Pac-Man console here, and they're all kind of playing their own loops. So this is that ASMR thing. I don't like the audio that they used on this. They could have used better audio, but you know. You get the idea. Excuse me, protein shake, too much protein. All right. Yep. Heard you before. All right. So let's talk about UI sounds in video games. Let's go ahead and use that transition. So there's 3 examples that I'm going to present to you. So a little bit, again, from my background, when I was working in video games in the 0s and 10s, I always gravitated to UI sounds, and all the other sound designers are like, you're a masochist. That's crazy. Why would you want to do UI sounds? That's the most like audio is subjective, UI is subjective. UI audio is the most subjective out of anything. How do you know when you actually get to it? How do you know when you make it correctly? So the 3 approaches that I have on this, the first one is a little bit more straightforward. We're talking about licensed and libraried. So when you are scoring for, say, a universe like Star Wars, Skywalker has done an amazing job doing a lot of telemetry sounds, doing a lot of really kind of good meta sounds along the way to kind of immerse you in their world. So when I worked on Star Wars Episode 3 and designed the UI sounds for it, a little humble brag here, but it's also important. When I started intentionally putting in a lot of UI sounds on this, the music supervisor, Jesse Harlan, liked my approach so much that he changed the background music to make it work better with the UI sounds that I put in. So let me just play. It's not going to hold up well under time, but you'll understand the example. Sorry for the short example on that, but basically the idea is those are library sounds repurposed, redesigned to fit within the context of the front end within episode 3. Some of them aren't necessarily, I use some probe droid sounds, which aren't necessarily telemetry sounds used in the Star Wars universe, but they fit for those things popping up at the bottom there, I guess. Episode 3 had a bit of an RPG element to it, so it was really fun to design for the UI on episode 3. Yes, we've heard you before. Okay, Burnout Paradise fans, apologies again. This is a very short clip. But when I was designing UI sounds for Burnout Paradise, there was a wholly different challenge for this. And that is in car sounds and arcadey car sounds specifically, there is very, very little sonic space for you. Everybody wants everything turned up all the time. I remember the creative director, turn up the engines, turn up the music. Everybody's talking about turning everything up. So to have HUD and UI sounds cut through the design that I ended up with, and I basically designed a sound palette for this, based on maybe 20 versions of iterations. The ones that we landed on were very transient, very atonal, very noise-based sounds, a lot of impacts, a lot of basically percussive hits that would cut through any of the tonality of the engines or any of the tonality of the music. Very limited sidechain compression technology back in 2007, 2008, whenever this came out. But anyway, here is an example of original IP with a sound palette to kind of create that UI friction.
Event wins are shown on your driver's license. Keep up your winning streak to advance to the next license.
So anyway, short clip, apologies about that. But essentially it was part of the same sound palette that we used for HUD notifications, like takedowns and race starts and race 1 and things like that. And it was always very kind of impactful and hard hitting. Third example. Okay, DJ Atomica. Third example, and this is a lot of fun to do as well. When I worked at Microsoft on Connected Ventures, I managed to secure a composer by the name of Daniel Pemberton. You may know him from the Spider-Verse movies right now. Dan created about basically a theme and a motif for Connected Ventures, and then maybe about 8 different versions of that particular song or that progression. And I've heard it so many times in so many different variations that it is embedded into my soul now. But anyway, for the UI sounds on this, for the flow, I decided exactly the opposite of the approach on Burnout Paradise. What I wanted is I wanted musical elements like a guitar sort of, or a melodic ping, something that really fits with the music that Daniel created, because it was such great music and so integrated into the experience of Connected Ventures. there's going to be a third version of that song coming in there. So you heard when the fill happened with the hand. Now, again, this is Connect, so it's basically camera tracking your hand and then following that so that there's a fill that happens. That was tick, kind of transient tick. But when it connected, there was a and then a bing that was in the same key as the music that happened afterwards. And the idea of this is we want the users to really experience this flow, really never be taken out of the immersion of the music within Connected Ventures. So I thought that was a really cool, fun, successful approach for UI sounds. And again, these three are very, very different. For the Star Wars stuff, we're using library sounds for an established universe that we're sort of paying homage to. For Burnout Paradise, we're creating our own sound palette that cuts through and sort of exists on top of the layers of sonic cacophony that goes on within racing arcade games. With Connected Ventures, we're really kind of intentionally integrating all of the UI sounds musically within the music that's playing in the background. So those are three completely different approaches to UI game sounds. So thank you, Daniel. So let's talk about the differences between UX and audio and the approaches. So the ubiquitous versus immersive computing. So for UX, you have no established audio source, and then UI, you do have established audio source. We use the Kratos example. I'm going to use Chaos Blades in my menus, and everyone will be like, "Oh, that's Chaos Blades. I get it because Kratos uses Chaos Blades." All part of that. UX, you do not have established audio source. The most intimidating and frightening assignment that I ever got when I was at Amazon ended up not working, ended up completely throwing it out because it was such an endeavor, was to change the click sound on Fire TV. So for anybody that's used Fire TV, maybe about tens of millions of users, there is one sound in the entirety of Fire TV, and it's that click sound. Most people don't like it, but they're used to it. So when changing that one sound, you are changing 100% of the audio in that massive experience. You're going to piss off more than half the people because, again, more than half the people don't like it, but they're used to it, and people don't like change. They're, what's happening? So we tried so many different approaches. We tried a skeuomorphic approach with actually recording, bike spokes. We tried the design approach of designing a tactile, wave-based percussion element. We tried so many different things. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't worth it. We're just going to keep it because everybody's used to it. And if it's not awesome, oh well, because it's easier than pissing off half the people, more than half the people, in order to get them used to something that they're going to be mad about later. Anyway, UX, close adherence to experience design, and then UI, implicit relationship to game design. Again, with the same thing with the Chaos Blades. As an example, I'm going to use, Aragorn's sword on Lord of the Rings for, a menu swipe when it's Aragorn's turn, or Legolas's bow, or, Gimli's axe. That is implicit to the game design because the users already know the sound of the axe and the bow and the sword. So they are used to it. They're expecting it. You do not want to use an axe, a sword, and a bow when you are opening up mail, for instance. So the close adherence to experience design is essentially working with UX designers to figure out what their approach is. For Windows 8, the user experience design was called unapologetically digital. So the sounds that Matt Bennett created for the Windows Phone, yeah, I know there was a thing. It was called a Windows Phone. The sounds were unapologetically digital. That makes sense. Close adherence to experience design. UX audio exists in a vacuum. Again, the example, when you get a mail notification, you get a mail notification. There is not anything that is attached to from a sonic perspective. That is basically, if you're not looking at your screen, that's existing, to let you know that you have this mail notification. It exists in a vacuum. It is not, it doesn't kind of bubble up from something else. Opposed to in games, audio exists as a small element. Most of the times in front end or in screens, you're going to have some sort of background music, some sort of ambience or something like that. You are already kind of integrating these sounds into that environment that you have created and that you have crafted from an audio perspective. And again, UX audio is often the sole customer experience. Notifications, a package arrived. The second most intimidating sound I created at Amazon was a purchase confirm sound when you use Alexa to buy something over your Echo device with your voice, and they wanted a purchase confirm sound. That sound, to get it approved, took over 40 iterations, about 5 decks, had to go up through maybe about 4 or 5 different senior vice presidents for the approval. And it took 11 months to get approved, simply because that sound was so important to the ecosystem of Amazon and to the purchasing. We want to get this right, and we want it to be signed off by everybody. Jeff was not involved in that, but Dave Limp was a senior vice president of devices. He signed off on that sound. So UX audio goals, do no harm, be unobtrusive. So again, as close to the subliminal as you can get is the most successful. When I worked in live sound back in the, as my son would say, back in the 1900s, I did live sound for Blue Man Group. And one of the things that the main engineer told me is, as the sound engineer for live performance, you are successful if nobody knows you are there. So same kind of goes for UX audio goals. You do not want to call attention to yourself. This next one is interesting: familiar but not identifiable. Now, reason we stray away from skeuomorphism in UX audio is because somebody has a direct relationship and reference to that particular sound. I was working with Amazon Office, and they wanted a sound for a meeting room being basically, it's time for the next meeting. So they wanted a door knock sound. Now imagine if you are in a meeting and then you hear like that right there. My dogs are going to bark because they think something. No, they didn't. It's very jarring, and it's very specific to, like, oh my God, there's somebody at the door. Like, that's all that means. So you don't want to design sounds that are that literal. You want to design sounds that allude to that, but do not communicate that directly. Next two are very, very important. The sounds are acceptable for the 1,000th time that you hear it, and sounds are acceptable for the first time that you hear it. So acceptable doesn't mean it has to be friggin' amazing. It has to be, the greatest sound you've ever heard in the universe. It's more important to make a sound that works the 1,000th time you hear it, like mail notification. Plenty of stories about all that stuff, but I see the time, so I want to get through this. Aesthetic approach, tracking progress with no North Star. So again, when you are designing audio with a UX team, you are most likely the only audio person there, and there's probably not a lot of precedence for you to be designing against. So determine the interaction design goals. Interaction designers and UX designers are going to be in Figma. They're going to be in Miro. They're going to have all of these, this pre-production that goes on with how they sort of lay things out and where they want to guide the customer. assess the overall mood and vibe. Is it relaxing? Is it urgent? Is it, this is why we had the urgency meter for our UX sounds. So the best approach is to go wide and narrow it down. Create a conversation. I like this element of this sort of aspect of things. I don't like that element. I like this, but I don't like that. Another approach that we call that, especially in the ad agencies and things like that, is mild to wild. I'm going to give you a version that you've heard a million times before. It's, a sine wave, it's a ping, it's sonar, it's radar. And then the wild version is, a creative director at Microsoft once told me I want it to sound like scratching the universe. Okay, that's super helpful. I can totally make a sound for that. All right. Next one. Sorry. Real quick to go through that. We're gonna get into HoloLens for the sneak peek there. Discussion and resonation. What resonates with everybody? This is a collaborative effort between you and the UX designers and the creative directors. You need to hone in on a direction and then know it could reset at any time. A lot of this stuff sounds really opaque, so let's get into specific examples. Thank you. Okay, for HoloLens, for the user experience sounds of this, it was super important because this is a brand new paradigm. You're interacting with a head-mounted display, especially 10 years ago. So I was inundated with meetings in 2015, and I said to my boss, send me home. Let me work from home for a week. And they're like, oh, work from home for a week. Oh my God. No, they didn't say that, but they go, okay. And I called it my vision quest, right? I went on and I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to you with 4 different versions of potential of sound palettes for HoloLens. And then we're going to discuss them. So the first one I did, mild to wild, is very, very literal, very skeuomorphic. I went to my optometrist and I said, hey, before you open, let me record all of your optometry devices and the dials and things like that when they're kind of setting up, kind of on the nose for a head-mounted display. But, this is what we came up with. By we, I mean me. Okay, super on the nose, super sparse. Really interesting approach, basically, because there's nothing but real recordings in that. So, yeah. No, not that. How about this one? How about next? HoloLens 2. All right. Semi-mild. This is basically based on sonar and radar, stuff that you've heard before, one-to-one reactions. With the interactions, pretty safe bet for call response audio cues and proven success. But is it innovative? I'll let you be the judge. Yasmin has a early prototype version of the HoloLens back when we had like GoPro cameras and things like that on there. I'm sure this is, we said 10 years ago, nothing new, nothing exciting. All right. No. All right. Version 3, this is where I start getting a little bit touchy-feely, a little bit woo-woo. Okay. The idea on this is research. I did a lot of research on the perception in the womb, and I guess the ambient noise floor for preborn is something like 80 decibels. So in the womb, it's relatively loud with all the fluids and everything like that going on. So the constant ambient sound really kind of inspired me to do this UX approach where there is a kind of constant background sound and these other sounds sort of bubble up from it to kind of keep you in that grounded transition in and out of sounds. And finally, the wild version. All right, this is where we get a little dark and a little bit abstract. Direct correlation to energy swells. So basically, if kind of electricity and kind of like physical energy in the world would be sonified. Yeah, let's just stick with that. Bit much, but we got to go to the outer atmosphere in order to kind of rein ourselves back in. So, thank you. Whoa, wait, what do we do? All right. So, energy. What did we decide on? So huge heated discussions and people talking about psychology of music and sound, and all the UX designers were really excited to get all these examples so that they could completely pick them apart. And that's exactly what we wanted. That's what, we want this discussion. We want this heated discussion. They gravitated towards the womb metaphor. They kind of liked it. See, it's true. The VP told me it should sound like scratching the universe. All right, well, let's scratch the universe. Some UX designers didn't want to abandon the simplicity of option 2, the guidance, that sort of straightforward element, but they wanted it to be differentiated. So let's combine the 2 and 3 life and guidance elements of things and see what we come up with. So this is the proposed out-of-box experience, essentially the calibration, where we're kind of measuring IPD, interpupillary distance. Yeah. Hear that constant in the background. All right. Okay. We abandoned the constant background ambience, specifically for perf and for field of view. The field of view is relatively not big. As you see the little thumbnails of the people talking, and so that's kind of the field of view that we had for Hololens. So if we kept the background ambient sound related to when you're within the field of view, it would expose how much you are not in the field of view. But anyway, we kept the abstract aesthetic of the direction of life sound design, and then we added transient and notification elements of guidance, the directions. So this was the big reveal at build 15.
And guess what? It's running on Windows 10. Welcome to Windows Holographic. I'm going to pull up my holographic start menu. And I'm going to open up Skype. I'm the worst at keeping in touch. So I'm going to take the people that matter most to me, and I'm going to pin them to this wall right here. That way, every time I walk into this room, I'll see their smiling faces and be inspired to reach out to them.
This is the world with holograms.
new ways to share ideas with each other. This is Microsoft HoloLens.
So you say to yourself, what was that?
And guess what?
No.
It's running on Windows.
So what was that crazy sound afterwards where you had that Windows logo? That was the Sonic brand for Windows, for Windows 10. Basically, there was an advertising agency. There was an agency called Listen that was tasked with coming up with the Sonic brand for Windows 10. And the marketing people kept going back to them and saying, we want it to sound more like Windows Holographic. We want it to sound more like Windows Holographic. And Steve Milton, the CEO at Listen at the time, basically, he and I had worked together a number of times when he was working with Skype. And he said, the guy that did Windows Holographic is an employee at Microsoft. Maybe you should just talk to him. So they did. And I thought that was kind of one of the most selfless things that I've ever heard in this kind of relatively competitive industry of somebody's. I mean, he got paid anyway, but, for an agency to say, hey, if you want it to sound more like that, why don't you talk to that guy? So for Sonic branding goals, and I'm going to try and push through this a little bit because I do want to leave time for questions. Expression and instrumentation, and mostly done by advertising sound studios, so with musical bass. So Sonic branding came from the kind of the jingles universe of, just these, these kind of bite-sized audio experiences that then relate to the brand and kind of identify the brand. But also, what do you want those to sound like, even when you're not looking at the brand? How do you want them to really kind of take on the personification of what that brand is going to communicate to everybody that uses it? And how does it blend with the rest of the product sounds? So tone and motion, right? Obviously, you want it to flow with the animation. You want it to align with the overall marketing and branding goals. You want it to emote that feel. When you think about that old Kiefer Sutherland show 24, that deetin, right? That's a Sonic brand because it's something that everyone remembers afterwards. Or, you want to present different versions and instrumentation. Again, same thing with UX audio. Discuss and resonate. Iterate to land the plane, and know it can reset at any time, because with the stakeholders, they're very, very excited to hear and agree or disagree with that branding decision that you are making about their product. So when we worked in Windows Holographic, even after they kind of said they wanted to sound like Windows Holographic, they wanted the Windows 10 logo to sound like Windows Holographic, we still had some iteration to go through. So this will be fast. Version 1. Not bad. A little breathy, maybe. A little bit more. Yeah, a little bit breathy. This next one is kind of a little bit more multi-tonal and harmonic. Similar. Again, they like the glass metaphor because of the Windows kind of transition that goes on there. Third one. This one I actually used a singing bowl for. They didn't like the singing bowl, but they did like that kind of sharp transient element of that transition between the 2D and 3D, which is very important for kind of Windows Holographic / Windows 10 at the time. So this is the one that I had a little bit of fun with, the abstract ambient wall. God, I love that one. I really do, but that's too out there for everyday use. Yeah, I'll play it again just because I like it. All right. So what did we end up with? This is the final reflection, tune reflection. Choral orchestra tuning flows into transition, swells reflection, major third interval, G to B. And that's the final one that we ended up using. Pour one out for Windows 10. Yeah. One more time. Cool. So when it all comes together, UX audio, sonic branding, marketing, let's look at the kind of the marketing video that they wanted to put out for this project.
What's the weather like in Pasadena?
Looks like there's a storm there too.
Oh no,
Looks like you're working from home too.
yeah, I guess I'll see you in a few.
Still really love that video and love what the agency did to match the music to the sound palette that I kind of created for that. And yeah, I thought that was really good. So we're not going to watch it again. Yeah, I'll leave time for this. I will post this up to basically talk about some of my UX audio favorites. My buddy Connor Moore did some work with Lucid Motors. And there's a company called Plan 8 out of Sweden that did all of the redesign for the UX audio on LinkedIn. I suggest to check those out because they're really, really cool and inspiring. Sonic brand favorites. I love the TikTok Sonic identity. It's so on brand for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and it really, really works great. I like the Hulu Sonic brand as far as streaming services and stuff like that. I think they finally nailed it after a bunch of misfires. That Zelig Sound did that one as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for your time. And we will go to questions now that it is 11 o'clock. We have some time for those that want to stick around afterwards. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to stop sharing and start looking at chats and questions. Fantastic. All right. So nice. Let's go chronologically. Whoa. All right. Maybe not chronologically. All right. Important question. My research paper. Would you say audio? Let me share this, right? We got to spotlight this. That's right. They told me how to do this in my, let's see. Sorry, I'm getting, whoa, slow computer. Spotlight. All right. First question, spotlight. I get the spinning beach ball of death. That looks good. What do we got? Spotlight. No. All right. So until the spotlight works, I will continue with reading it out loud. Would you say that dynamic range customization is a desirable tool to add to traditional? Yes, thank you. Traditional game audio settings, such as large, small dynamic range in Resident Evil 2 remake, or output specific, such as the Witcher franchise. Yeah, audio dynamic range customization is always super helpful. Any choices and options that you give to the listener is a good thing. You know, I know there are certain people that say, I'm going to mix it and then, you know, love it or hate it. Then people usually hate it. So any options that you get for customization, I think is super important. Yes. Next question, I'm going to scroll down, from Damien. Do you think, there we go, there's a different vision in UX, UI sound design for interface and apps between countries? Oh, interesting, like a localization. Not if you do it right. Okay, because here's my thought on that. If you do it right, you're tapping into the psyche of the user, and music and audio transcends languages. A little woo-woo, a little bit, but from our lizard brain perspectives, like when we listen, I always wonder, like, if you hear birds chirping and sort of think, like, is that what we came up with UX audio and notifications for? So I think that's universal. So I think if done correctly, there's an aesthetic sort of, pleasure response that the users and the listeners will get, regardless of what language they speak or what region they're from. That being said, I know that different regions have different scales, different tonalities. So, yeah, there's probably some level of interpretation on that. But overall, if you nail it, if you knock it out of the park, you don't need to worry about language. Next question. Do you prefer to create car and vehicle sounds through the process of sound design, Krotos Igniter, or through the Foley recordings of recording actual vehicles? And how does the creation of vehicle sounds fit into the budgeting of a game project such as Burnout Paradise, when you mentioned, especially if it takes actual car Foley recording approach? So yes to both answers. We worked with Charles Deenan, who was in charge of the Need for Speed franchise, to record all of the sounds on dyno recordings, run them through the rev lines. So that became super, super important for that. And then the car Foley recordings, again, we did junkyard records. I always like, for Foley and things like that, if you can afford to use a Foley designer, by all means do that. If you can't, do a junkyard recording. Usually the insurance companies, video games, don't like it when their audio team goes to junkyards to record stuff because of liability, but you can sign your life away and say, if I get hurt, it's my fault. Yeah, going to the junkyard and doing recordings is definitely an effective way to get a lot of that Foley stuff. And it's a lot of fun too. And it's great for Be Real too, making of. Yeah. All right, check. Mark. And next question is slow scroll. Alyssa Fabian, goodness gracious. Sorry, I just scrolled past your thing. I'm having scrolling issues. Please stand by. I'm gonna play some music. Live Q&A with the sounds of very slow internet, which is weird because I'm supposed to have something that doesn't make beach ball sounds. Okay. Paris, just went yours. All right, Alyssa, here we go. Please don't, okay, don't scroll through. All right. Sorry, I'm having trouble scrolling on this side of things. Anybody on the Airwiggle side want to jump in and kind of read the next question for me, because I am having some problem with the live Q&A and scrolling. I want to answer Alyssa's question, and I keep scrolling past it and back and forth. Here we go, Spotlight. Have there been moments during UI, UX audio design, especially for very crucial sounds with multiple iterations, that you've experienced a bit of burnout with the process to make it as good as possible? Interesting questions. Reset, go on a walk your dog, go into nature. When I went on that vision quest, basically I procrastinated for a really long time, gathered a bunch of assets and kind of had them in a DAW, and didn't really come up with a lot. Hey, Lewis, didn't really come up with a lot of the sounds until after I kind of, like you said, if you're just in this universe for a long time, and burnout will show up. Not burnout paradise. Getting burnt out will show up. Take a break, decompress, go do something completely different. Go fishing, go walk in nature, and talk to yourself and look like a crazy person, and then come back to your seat and your DAW, and 9 times out of 10 you'll be inspired enough to come up with something really cool and really interesting. And I don't know why I was on a walk in the woods and I had that kind of idea about being in the womb and the ambient noise floor on that. And that's sort of what the breakthrough was on the HoloLens UX audio palette. Cool. Thanks, Alyssa. All right, next. I think my internet's working now. Yay. Working on your, yeah, get in there, right. Working on your projects, did you manage to allow some specific frequency range? Yes, 100%, especially when you're working with product sound and bespoke speakers. A lot of times they're mono, right? We know we love mono, right, Lewis? And a lot of times there is a specific frequency range. Many times it's that band directly above. This was definitely the case with HoloLens because of the audio wave drivers, which were essentially the parametric speakers that were built into the units. Interestingly enough, spatialization works the best with frequencies from about 5 to 10K. It seems really kind of harsh, so you can kind of counter that with your design processes and make it, like maybe round it out a little bit more. But that band right above kind of vocal range, that's the best place to work. Also, a point about familiarity of sounds. Tend to make many sound pitch variations to diversify sound, or just one of them. Let me see, Tristan. Sorry, let me see. Oh, here we go. Maybe both, depending. I don't do a lot of pitch variation for UX sounds. We're not looking at variation. We're looking at how to communicate as much information from the most familiar sound. Problem with pitch variation, then you don't want variance necessarily as much as you want consistency, to answer that question. So UX sounds, no, not a lot of pitch variation, believe it or not. All right, next question. Trying to blast through this. And working projects, specific frequency ranges. Yes, that's Tristan. Has to be that. Terry Wellman says, as soon as I heard the click with rotating panels, I immediately mused adding the sound of a tank turret. Oh, yeah. Internal or external, could be both, inside and outside. Good point, Terry. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of familiarity in sounds that you hear that kind of, and that's the problem with skeuomorphism, is that your brain will kind of lock onto the last thing that you remember hearing that was like that. And you don't want that with UX sounds. You want it familiar, but not identifiable. But good point about the tank sounds. And Sam MJ says, do you think that making sounds from organic textures like wood and glass help them feel more tactile and grounded? Same answer as the last question. Using those as elements are great. Even when I used the singing bowl, it was too much like a singing bowl, and I didn't want people to feel like they were going into a yoga studio every time they put on HoloLens. Too identifiable. And once your brain can lock onto something, you want your brain in the periphery of that. You don't want it like, oh, that's the sound of a cat meowing, So the organic textures work as elements, but not, you don't want it entirely skeuomorphic. You don't want it entirely literal. Thanks, Sam. Next question, Ian Macbeth. Do you use the reel-to-reel for audio design? I do. Yes, thank you very much. This is my pride and joy, my Pioneer RT909. I do, and especially for tape saturation. I know that probably is not much difference between a tape saturation plugin and actually bouncing something to to like a 15-inch reel, quarter inch. But the process for me is very cathartic. I like to basically take all the sounds from my DAW that I will use for UX and then run it really hot into the inputs of my reel-to-reel and then back into the DAW. So I'll be in the red. I'll be like +3. And that tape saturation just really rounds it out. So yeah, I do use the reel-to-reel. I am into that. Here I am. I joined quite late. Is there a way to rewatch this? Thanks. Yes, there is. Yes.
Go to the live replay space on Airwiggles. It will be up probably within the next 2 hours if I'm good and I'm on track.
Robin asks if I'm creating a lot of these with synthesis. If so, what plugins do you like to use? So interestingly enough, something like FM synthesis, chromophone, alto. I use another thing that I use a lot. I use this for the siren is the kind of analog synthesis from my Medusa. I'll show you. Excuse me. Are you gonna? Here we go. Let's see if I can. Yeah. There's this thing. Polyend and Dreadbox did this thing called the Medusa hybrid synthesizer. It's got a digital element and an analog element in it too. It's 6 voices. Yeah. But yes, I use synthesis for it. You don't want to use you don't want to use presets because presets have been done before, and that's cheap. You don't want to just take somebody else's work. And now I look short. You don't want to take somebody else's work. And now I look tall. And repurpose it for your stuff. That's cheating almost. But you do want to use the synthetic elements, and the kind of less like complex they are, the easier they are to combine with other elements. Victor asks, could you recommend resources for psychoacoustic knowledge related to the topic of presentation? Psychoacoustics knowledge, yeah, there's a lot of interesting approaches and thoughts going on with the kind of psychology of music and perception. I will get back to you on that. I didn't put any references on this, but check back to Airwiggles, and I will post it in the Airwiggles chat for my references for the kind of psychology of music and sound and audio, which is really cool. And that might not be it, because we're going to go through as many of these as possible, because I know we're out of time, probably in about 3 minutes. Out of curiosity, do you create all sounds in the box, or is there also certain recording gear that's essential to your work? I mean, always, always, always be recording. ABR. Just because you're, again, walking in the woods, you hear something crazy, you hear something interesting, that sound that, like, your garbage disposal makes is going to be a great monster sound once you pitch it down, record it in 192. It's a combination of both things. Do I use a lot of audio recordings? Not necessarily, but it's great for inspiration. When I bring it back and sort of say, like, oh, that didn't sound quite as good as I thought it did, but now I remember the idea behind what I wanted to record in that. So, ABR, always be recording. Create all sense in the box. Rina asks, may I ask? Yes, you may. What makes a sound tactile? I think tactile sounds are identifiable as such, but are there specific sonic qualities to make them so? Frequency range, kind of in that, like, I hate to say it, in that like chewing range, right? My wife has misophonia, so like I have to chew very quietly, but in that, again, maybe 5 to 10K range, and transient noise-based sort of percussive elements of things can make it sound very tactile. A lot of times just recording the attack of something that you have from like a percussive element. You don't want it to sound like a snare drum. Again, they're familiar, not recognizable, but just to grab an attack off of that or something like that can make it very tactile sounding. Hope that is helpful. Next question, and we got the scroll going. When it comes to moving from games to other audio areas, when updating Reels resumes, do you recommend creating an entirely new Reel resume? I have sections. I have game audio, product audio, UX, sonic branding. On my Reel, I have the different sections of that. I would recommend, because a lot of times you're not going to be applying to a place that does all of them, but they are relevant. So I would recommend putting them in different parts of the Reel if you have enough material. If not, all good. Last question, Jaden. Oh no, you said that. All right, you just told me that. Okay, sorry, Jaden. I didn't see your name when I looked at that. Nathaniel asks, thank you for the insightful talk. You're welcome. Do you have advice on how to identify UI sounds in order to create your own version of that? I don't know if I understand. How to identify UI sounds in order to create your own versions of them. Do you want to jump in the chat and tell me what you mean by that? I'm just curious. I don't know what that means.
I'm not particularly sure either. I'd love to help you with that. But
yeah,
not just you.
Nathaniel, if you're around, we get a couple more minutes to ask me what that means or to explain what that means. If not, I will move along to the next question and check back at chat. Lewis, if you could take a look at the chat and see if Nathaniel responds, or if he does not, then, I think that was the last question anyway, right?
Yes, it was. He's typing, so hopefully we'll be.
Okay, there you go.
Whilst we're waiting, Chris, that was awesome. I really loved it.
Oh, good.
That was
I'm so glad. Thank you very much. I just, yeah. It's fun to, I haven't done one of these talks in a while. That's really fun. I really appreciate AirCon and all the support you guys have with the dotted line from game audio into all the other areas. Let's
thank
see.
you so much.
Yeah.
Nathaniel says that he'll DM you later.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds great.
Let's wrap it up there.
Cool. Thanks everyone for your time and your attention. This is recorded. This will be posted. Yeah, we will see you on Air Wiggles. Right. Thanks.